Welcome back. The topic for today's discussion is social engineering and phishing attacks. And this is roughly what we would like to discuss today. We'll understand what is social engineering attack and the different forms and means of the phishing attack, which is one of the prominent type of the social attacks that you see, and then some advanced techniques of the phishing methods that are used, and then at the end what are the methods or options we have got to safeguard ourselves, don't not to fall prey to such phishing attacks. This is roughly what we would like to discuss. And let me begin by showing one case study. So what is shown here is this is actually a phishing attack case study. 50 users of online banking were contacted by some female employees of an organization, and at normally when female employees talk very nicely, saying that maybe your online account need to be reset, your password is about to expire, you need to do the verification of the account or something along these lines, and for that you need to give the username and passwords of your online banking account. And what is here is, out of 50 employees, 16 of them actually gave up the complete username and the passwords of their bank accounts, and 8 of them just gave the username without giving the password, and 26 of them actually refused to give any details to the employees. So when they called, this is what they found out. So the source of this experiment is shown here in this slide. The point is not on the number. So the number might vary, although this is actually involving a ridiculously small number of the people contacted in this case. But nevertheless, what I wanted to say is there are some people now who actually fall prey and end up giving the detailed sensitive details like the banking account username and passwords. So the number of the people might, if you conduct another survey, the number of the people who end up giving the details might vary. But nevertheless, there are some section of the people who are actually vulnerable, who can actually fall prey to such malicious campaigns. So that is the takeaway. So this can be done with anything other also. So maybe you might scare the users saying that your machine is infected, you need to do something like this. You might get an fraudulent email. So in different forms it can take. So that's what the social engineering is all about. Social engineering attacks. Phishing is one of the type of the social engineering attack. Actually, it is less to do with the technical means, but more to do with the human interaction. So you play with the, talk to the people, you send a legitimate looking email, and then you entice the user to do something what the as an attacker you want to him or her to do. So that's all about the social engineering attack. So this social engineering attack can happen, usually happens in 4 stages. In the first phase, what we call it as the investigation phase, you understand the target, meaning with whom you are going to talk, to whom you are sending an email, probably if you are sending an email. So accordingly, you can customize what you want to send, what you want to talk. If the user is very illiterate, then simply by calling and asking their username and password or the PIN number of the debit card, they might straight away tell. but the user is educated and is a little bit aware, then they may not immediately reveal the or give the username and the password or the pin or debit card number. So you need to use something different, some advanced technique. So understanding the background of the users is very much essential. So that is the first phase of the social engineering attack. And in the second phase, once you understand the background and you make the user to commit some action what you want them to commit, then in the second phase you get the foothold. So there is something that the user has already done. So they might have clicked on an URL or installed some software or gave away the username, credentials or password of their banking account or PIN number of their bank debit card or credit card, something like that. So that's where you get the foothold. And then once you get the foothold, you try to, in the third phase, you try to expand that foothold. Maybe if one account is compromised, you try to compromise the second account of the user, or using the person who has already given the credentials, you might want to entice him to invite other people, similar people, maybe for his or her friends or somebody to do the same act. So that's where you expand the footprint. And then in the last phase, you actually, once you do the damage, you try to erase the traces. So don't leave anything who actually did that. Don't tell your name, or maybe don't use the normal phone telephone to make a call. You actually use a voice or IP call mechanism or something like that, so that you actually don't leave any trace who actually called, from where he called. Tracing that might be a little difficult. So this is how the social engineering attacks are executed. As I said, phishing is one of the type of the social engineering attack, but there are other types of the social engineering attacks also. So let's take a quick look at other types of the social engineering attacks. So one of the type of social engineering called as baiting. So what this baiting means, makes us, it makes a false promise. So maybe if I can give an example, you could leave a pen drive with a writing on the pen drive. This is containing the trade secret or salary details of all the employees. So out of curiosity, the person might connect that pen drive to their computer, and then once they connected, they open a particular file, something might get installed on your computer. So by simply telling that this contains the salary details or this is containing the trade secret, you actually made the user to commit to something, some false act. So that is what thing is. So you entice the user to, or you might tell the leave a pen drive with a message saying that don't connect this one. So the moment you say don't connect this one, then out of curiosity why somebody is saying don't connect this one, they might end up connecting, and then something might get installed on your computer. So that is called baiting. This is one form of the social engineering attack. The other prominent form of the social engineering attack is something called scareware. So sometimes you might have seen on your computer screens and other places where the moment you visit a website, a message pops up. Your computer is infected. We need to scan this computer immediately, or install the anti-malware immediately. Otherwise, you might lose all files on your computer or on your desktop, something like this. Along these lines, that message might be keep on flashing on your screen. So you, by seeing that, user gets scared, and then once they get scared, the user clicks on that. They actually, instead of an anti-malware, the malware itself might get installed on your computer, and it might sit on your computer. So that's what the to do. So other way around, you might tell that if you don't do this activity, verify your account will be deleted. So in the hope to secure their accounts, the users might click on some malicious URL given by the users. So something like this can happen. So this is another form of the social engineering attack. And the third and the most prominent form of the social engineering attack is called as phishing. The survey example that we saw. So what happens here is you basically trick the user to give away some sensitive information. So this could be, as I said, the banking account credentials as well, or it can be a credit card details of the users. So some kind of the sensitive information which has some implications on the end user is collected. So this is called as phishing. So to give a context before we discuss the phishing, different forms of phishing in detail. So the summary, a report which was published in the year 2018 actually states that India lost around $53 million, that's about 328 crore rupees due to phishing scams in the quarter July to September quarter in the year 2017. So in that period, there were total of 3,750 reported phishing attacks, mainly involving different banking and financial institutions within in India. So that report claims that so India in a country where it is in the fourth largest target of the phishing attacks, with US receiving the maximum number of the phishing attack. Obviously, that has got more digital penetration. So comparatively, we are having the population which are less tech savvy. Probably that might be the reason. But nevertheless, given the scale of the population in India has got, there are large number of the users which are actually exposed and are vulnerable to such cyber attacks. And it says that total 7 percentage of the such social engineering and phishing attacks that globally take place are targeted towards the users in the Indian subcontinent. So, although this is a slightly older 2-3 years back report, but nevertheless, it's actually give away some insight about the scale and the variety of the attacks. So, how much money is so in one quarter, in 3 months period, if India can lose 328 crore, that's actually this number. So, over the period, this number might increase. So that is why this is actually a very dangerous the attack. We all need to worry about that. So that brings us to the question: what exactly is phishing? Why we are calling phishing? What exactly it is? NPOP. So to answer that question, phishing is actually made up of two terms. One is called phreaking, and the second one is called phishing. Phreaking means making free phone calls. So earlier days, when these telephone pillars used to be there, if somebody can climb the telephone pillar and hook a device, then they can actually dial with someone else's number, and then the person whose number is used for calling is going to be billed, and you receive the bill. If suppose if your number is used to make the call, somebody else climbing the that pillar talks over the phone, but you end up paying for it. That is called phreaking. So this is from that user's perspective, is making the free telephone calls using someone else identity and the telephone number. And phishing means so you go to a font, and then you actually entice the put up some food item at the needle, and then you wait for fish to come and bite. So in the pond, there are a lot of fishes. You actually invite some of those fishes to come and bite so that you can catch them. So the moment they come and bite, they actually become the victims. So similar strategy is used here. So probably you make call to 10,000 people. Out of that, maybe a small section of the people, maybe 50 people, end up giving their credentials. So that's a good enough number to leverage to gain some financial advantage illegitimately. So that is what is phishing is all about. So this phishing attack, as I said, is a form of the social engineering attack, but not all social engineering attacks are phishing attacks. So phishing is one of the prominent type of the social engineering attack, but it is not the it does not encompass the entire social engineering attacks. So what it does in the phishing attack, what we have is we simply mimic the legitimate communication, the or the appearance. So maybe you might send an email which is looking exactly similar to what a legitimate email originating from the particular company might look like. So appearance wise, it is the same. So content wise, also it might look similar, but it actually have some component, maybe an URL is given in that email which is actually redirecting you to a malicious website, or you might have a website which is actually looking like the legitimate website, but it is not the legitimate websites. So naturally in both the cases you have some identity of a legitimate entity is spoofed, and then you are actually giving redirecting user to some other else. So the biggest targets of the such phishing attacks are the financial institutions, because there is money involved and people do want to take advantage of that by correcting a similar looking website. You might harvest the username and passwords, and then you try that on the legitimate counterparts and to illegitimately gain transfer the money to your account. So, for nevertheless, financial institutions, although they are the biggest victims, but they are not the only victims. There are other institutions which might be impacted. Maybe the social media companies. Somebody might create an account which is actually looking like a legitimate social media account, and then you gain the you give that URL to users, and some of them might. In the hope that they are logging into a legitimate social media account, they actually end up giving username and password. You harvest that, and then you try it on the legitimate website, and then once you get the credential, you can do anything. You can send any message to anybody. You can read out what is there in their private inbox or anything like that. But there are other industries like gaming industries, and even the cyber security companies themselves sometimes become the targets themselves. So these are some of the financial institutions: PayPal and banking institutions and online selling websites and all companies like eBay and all are the biggest targets. So, as I said, phishing involves harvesting the credentials of the users and then trying it out on the legitimate counterparts. So, this operation happens something with a information flow, which is shown as in this slide. So, what you do in the beginning is the item number one or action number one is, in the beginning you send maybe a large set of spam emails to a large set of users, and out of that some of the users might click on that the URL that is given, which is embedded in as part of the email, and then you collect the username and password or the credentials of the users. So I repeat, in the first place you send a large number of the emails to the potential victims, and a fraction of those users actually end up giving their credentials, and you harvest you collect those credentials into maybe into a database or into a file. And once you gather enough number of the results, you use another computer which is and five, and then you establish a connection with the legitimate counterpart, maybe a financial institution, and then you try transferring the money to your account. So this is exactly how the information actually flows. So there are mail senders that are involved, which sends the illegitimate emails to potential victims, and then the information harvester or credential harvester actually collect the credentials of the users, and then the encashers which actually try out those collected credentials on the legitimate websites, and then do some illegitimate transaction on behalf of the user. So, financial institutions and transactions are the biggest threats. But how exactly this phishing attacks actually takes place? So, there are some forms that the techniques that the attacker uses. One of the common technique used is something called misspelled URL. So, in that, what you do is you maybe let's take an example. The State Bank of India has got a website called www.statebank.com. So you might, as an attacker, create an URL which is having the statebank.com as one component, but something else is also there, maybe swabank.statebank.com. So if any user, so just looking at the statebank.com, if he clicks on that, then that user might be redirected to any legitimate website. On the other hand, what you can also do is, so let's say Microsoft.com is a legitimate website. Microsoft.com is MICROSOFT.com, that's the spelling. You take out one alphabet from that Microsoft.com. In this case, the letter R is actually missing, and then you give this URL to the potential victims. Somebody who doesn't read that URL properly, or in the hurry or something, if they click on that, then they might end up visiting the site. The other technique is, so you might retain the same alphabet that are there in that legitimate URL, but you manipulate them, interchange some of the characters within that URL, and then you create one more domain. So this website also is looking like the original website, but it is not the website. So like this, you can actually manipulate, misspell the URLs and trick the user to click on that illegitimate URL that you created. This is one way of doing the phishing attacks. So the such URLs are sent in as part of the email campaign. So the other technique that the attacker can use is creating something called as the anchor text. So when you open a page, so maybe let's say an HTML page is there. In that page, so the link is showing some text on the page, but it is might be it is saying the Microsoft.com. To visit the Microsoft website, you click on this one, and then it might have the character Microsoft.com. But internally, that text that is linked to the URL that is linked to Microsoft.com might have some other illegitimate website, maybe something similar to what is shown in the previous case. So here I have got a simple web page. This is an HTML page, and an URL is shown here. This is showing that goodguy.com. So in the hope that I am connecting to goodguy.com, if I click on this one, it might take me to some other website. So what the text that is shown here is goodguy.com, but if you show on see in the bottom left corner here, it is actually showing that this is actually badguy.com, www.badguy.com. So this is how you show something on the page which is looking legitimate, but internally it is linked to some other illegitimate website. So an unsuspecting user, once he or she clicks on that, then they will be redirected to that malicious website. So this is although very easy to identify. If you rest your mouse, then on the left hand side, bottom corner, you can actually see to which URL it is taking you. But not all users are tech savvy and they understand such tricks, and some of them might end up clicking on that and revealing the credentials of the users. So this is another simple technique that an attacker can use to fool the end users. So sometimes the other technique that I used is sometimes the fake SSL log. When you visit the website, sometimes you see that on the left hand side the green color log symbol. So if somebody has got a valid certificate to illegitimate websites, so maybe for sbabank.statebank.com itself, if I obtain one illegitimate certificate, then by certifying authority, then the green color symbol, log symbol would be shown on the website. So that will give an feel that the end user that this website is a legitimate website. So why this can happen? Sometimes the certification agencies also don't do due diligence or don't verify the authenticity of the websites. If I walk into there with a certificate with a public key, and they actually a small amount of fee they collect, and then they issue a certificate to a particular website. So if I am an illegitimate user, I can abuse that and by paying some fee, then I can get a certificate to some illegitimate websites also. So sometimes, even though I may not have a legitimate certificate can be, by the way, created with ease. So there are even open source tools available to create public and private key pairs, and then you can have a certificate. Only thing is you need to get it certified by a certifying authority. So if that does not happen, so you might see such warning messages. This website is actually giving you a certificate which is not looking legitimate, and your browsers might warn you that this website doesn't look legitimate. Our certificate is not valid or certified by certifying authority. Even then, but it shows an option: you want to continue or you want to go back to say take. If the user click overlooks that and then continue the website, then they might end up connecting to an illegitimate website. So these are all the means with which the user can be tricked to visit some illegitimate websites. So the next question is, by creating such websites, what exactly the attacker is actually trying to do? What kind of payload or the things are left behind on your computer once you commit that mistake? So one of the thing is a keylogger might get installed on your computer, which actually a keylogger is a malicious software which actually records your keystrokes. Whatever you type on your keyboard, those keystrokes are recorded, and then they in the background once in a while these keystrokes are exported to the owner of such software. There may be an email is sent as an attachment with all the keystroke that are done. So that keystroke might include anything, the chatting that you might do with your friends, the when you log into your online social networking website and the credentials of those login pages. Could be anything. You are even including your banking credentials, the credit card details, or anything. So all those details can be exported to such source of such attackers. The other thing could be it could install a spyware. A spyware, maybe a simple example would be so what kind of sites do you visit? Spyware sitting in on your computer can actually look at the history of your browser. So what kind of sites do you visit? What kind of movies you watch? Looking that will help the attacker to understand your background, what kind of person you are, and then subsequently they might actually target you with a particular type of the their attacks. So that can be a spyware can also be left on your computer once you commit visit those illegitimate links. And there are other sophisticated attacks like software malware software which actually grab the screen. So nowadays the banks and all have got this virtual keyboards. You don't actually type them on the keyboard. So if you don't type in the keyboard, then keyloggers will not be able to collect the details of username and passwords. Then what to do? So screen grabbers will actually record the screens of what is on. So once you open a virtual keyboard on your computer, the virtual keyboard and what key that you click on the keyboard, virtual keyboard will also be recorded. So that's the screen. Such software can also be left behind on your computer. But on the other hand, there might be a botnet, just like in the last class we discussed. Botnet is also malicious software which actually used to mount attacks like distributed denial of service attacks. So once you click on those URLs, such bots might come and sit on your computer. This is another kind of the payload that is left as form of the phishing attack. So, as I said, the main goal is to basically harvest the login credentials, the username and the password, but that is not the only thing. So, you might want to get the banking credentials, the credit card details, the credit card number, CVV details, and on the other hand, the people might also be interested to know your personal details, where do you live, and your address details, your gender information, and so forth. And if the attack is targeted towards a company, then the people might be interested to know what are the trade secrets of your company, what kind of business you are into. And then on the other hand, it might be simply, as I said, to generate the DDoS attack and other kind of the illegitimate attacks. Also, this phishing can be used. And in order to expand the botnets, so today you might have in your botnet 1,000 bots. Tomorrow you want to have a larger. The larger the bots you have got, then the larger the capacity that you have got to generate. So in order to expand your footprint of the botnet, you might do such malicious phishing campaigns as well. So at the other extreme end, they might be interested to know the confidential documents and the details that are there on your computer. So these are actually cons and means. So there are some specific types of the phishing attacks that are commonly practiced.